Detectives on drug charges facing another accusation. Charges of preventing the course of justice have been added to drugs-related accusations already faced by two long-serving Essex police detectives. Braintree-based officers Detective Sergeant Philip Stimpson and Detective Constable Wolfgang Bird made a second appearance before Southend Magistrates Court on Saturday. Both detectives have been charged with preventing the course of justice. Stimpson, 35, from Colchester, has also been charged with 4 other offences, one each of supplying and possessing both amphetamines and cannabis resin. Bird, 38, is accused of conspiring to supply cannabis resin. In addition, he is charged with conspiracy to defraud D&G Hardware of the sum of £23,400, with Edward Walsh, 35, an unemployed panel beater from Milton Keynes. Magistrates remanded both officers in custody until May 23rd to appear again. All of the drug offences are said to have been committed earlier this year. Stimpson and Bird were arrested and questioned by Southend police last week. They first appeared in court on Thursday, charged only with the drug-related and fraud charges. I did illicit deals with corrupt cop. Supergrass admits to scams as barrister questions his evidence. A Supergrass at the centre of a murder trial has sensationally admitted illicit deals with a corrupt Essex police officer. Darren Nichols, who claims he drove the getaway car after the killings, also told the court he would have done anything to see the two men he has accused of the executions arrested. They are Jack Worms of Main Road, Brockford, Suffolk, and Michael Steele of St Mary's Road, Great Bentley, Essex. Both have denied gunning down Pat Tate of Gordon Road, Basildon, Tony Tucker of High Road, Fobbing, and Craig Rolfe of Cowshire Avenue, Chafford 100, in a Range Rover at Retterdon on December 6, 1995. Nichols was clearly uncomfortable and often angry as he was cross-examined in the Old Bailey dock. He admitted being an informer for the corrupt officer who has been referred to as Detective Constable A in court. But Steele's defence, Graham Parkins QC, told him, "You were involved in illegal activities with him and you profited from what the officer did and what he allowed you to do." Nichols got to know the policeman only weeks after the shootings, and Mr Parkins claimed they plotted to board a North Sea ferry and steal £150,000 being taken abroad to buy drugs, planned to make amphetamine, then use it to set up two men who had displeased Nichols, stole drugs, then dished them out like sweets, arranged for Nichols to sell drugs to customers, then pass on their names to Officer A so he could arrest them and win promotion, told senior police officers about 60 kilos of dud cannabis, which Nichols had dumped in a gravel pit, then blamed 2 innocent men for putting it there. Let Nichols receive a £400 reward and brought drinks together to celebrate. Nichols claimed he'd only been involved with the officer in a bid to get back at the 2 men he claims killed Tate, Tucker and Rolfe after they fell out over a cannabis deal. "There was no limit to what I would do to try to get him to arrest Worms and Steele," he admitted. But Mr Parkins rejected his claim. "Despite what you and A were up to, you never once told him, even when he raised the question of Retterdon, that you claimed to know who committed these murders." Nichols admitted he hadn't. When questioned about Officer A by other police, Nichols claimed he was just an informer. But when those officers told him they had recordings of his telephone conversations with Detective Constable A, he said, "Oh dear," and laughed. Nichols told the court, "I laughed because the tape didn't matter to me. Compared to the trouble I was in, that was nothing." Mr Parkins pointed at Worms and Steele and said, "Yes, by then you had made allegations in another direction." But Mr Nichols, how does one know when you are lying and when you are not? The case continues. Officer was bribed by Supergrass. A Supergrass at the centre of a triple gangland murder trial had his wife's driving prosecution dropped after bribing a corrupt police officer, the Old Bailey heard. The jury was told police informant Darren Nichols offered a £100 bung to an Essex detective, and days later the charges against his wife were dismissed. Nichols also openly dealt drugs with the officer, who cannot be named for legal reasons, Wolfgang Bird, offering him large quantities of amphetamines. Supergrass Darren Nichols is alleged to have unwittingly driven 2 hitmen away from the scene, where drug barons Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe were blasted to death with a pump-action shotgun. The shootings took place as the 3 friends sat in their Range Rover in a deserted country lane in the village of Retterdon on December 6, 1995. The trio had been lured to remote Workhouse Lane with the promise of a large cocaine deal, unaware an ambush had been laid for them. The court was told the bung had been offered to the police officer, dubbed Detective Constable A, Wolfgang Bird, after Nichols' wife had been stopped by police for a driving offence. Edward Rees, defending Peter Corey of London Road, Clacton, who faces a charge of conspiring with Wholmes and Steele to smuggle cannabis, said to Nichols, "You were going to bung him £100. Nichols replied, "This was mentioned." Mr. Rees said, "And what happened?" Nichols replied, "I was told they weren't going to prosecute." The court heard Nichols would frequently discuss drug deals with the Essex detective, who was arrested on the same day the police informer was pulled in by officers investigating the triple killings. They were told drugs seized by officers, which were then kept at the station where Detective Constable A was based, had gone missing. Nichols said he'd turned to the corrupt policeman and become his informant with the aim of getting Steele and Wholmes arrested and jailed. The trial continues. Police tactics are questioned in court. The detective responsible for grilling a supergrass at the centre of a triple gangland murder trial has been quizzed in court about his interviewing methods. Detective Constable Christopher Winston, who interviewed police informer Darren Nichols over a number of months, was accused of helping him, prompting him and suggesting things that he hadn't said. The claim was made by Graham Parkins QC, who was defending Michael Steele, one of the men accused of the murders. Steele, 54, and Jack Wholmes both deny the killings. Nichols claims the two men, Lord Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe, down a country track before shooting them dead. Their bodies were found on December 7th in a Range Rover down Workhouse Lane in Retterden. Mr. Parkins told the court that during one taped interview, the tape was turned off for 20 minutes while Nichols went to the toilet. When he returned, his solicitor confirmed there had been no discussion off tape. But the legal representative had also been out of the room making telephone calls during the vital minutes. Mr. Parkins repeatedly asked DC Winston if Nichols had ever been questioned off tape. DC Winston replied, "Absolutely not." Then Wholmes' defence, David Lenneman QC, continued the barrage of questions when he asked DC Winston if Nichols had ever tried to find out if he would get a reduced sentence for testifying. DC Winston admitted Nichols had asked, but he said he'd never answered him. The trial continues.